The moment that changed my life didn't come with shouting or anger. It came with laughter. Not cruel laughter, worse. Casual, thoughtless. The kind that tells you you're already invisible. I'm Margaret Maggie Wilson, 64 years old, born and raised in Ohio, a retired school cafeteria manager, a widow of 9 years, and until that afternoon, a grandmother who thought she still belonged. It happened on a quiet Sunday at my daughter Lisa's house in Columbus, Ohio. I had driven in early with a blueberry pie cooling on the counter, the same recipe my own mother taught me when I was 12. The house smelled like coffee and cinnamon, and for a moment, everything felt warm and familiar, safe. Then Lisa asked me to take a photo. She handed me her phone. A new one. All glass and no buttons. I turned it over in my hands, embarrassed already. I hadn't owned anything newer than a flip phone. My fingers hovered, unsure where to press. "Mom, just tap it," Lisa said, distracted. I tapped. Nothing. Behind me, I heard a snort, then laughter. My grandson Tyler, 14, tall, voice already deeper than his father's, leaned back on the couch, shaking his head. "Grandma, it's not a remote," he said. My granddaughter Emma giggled. "She doesn't even know how phones work." I smiled. Or at least I tried to. My hands were trembling now. I tapped again. Swiped the wrong way. The screen went dark. Tyler laughed louder. "Wow. How did you survive before the internet?" That one landed hard. Lisa finally looked up. Okay, she said lightly, taking the phone from my hands. "She's just old school." Old school. Not capable. Not learning. Just outdated. Everyone moved on. Conversation flowed. The moment passed for them. But something inside me cracked open and stayed that way. I sat there, nodding, sipping my coffee, while a quiet voice in my head whispered something I didn't want to hear. "They don't need you anymore." That night, back in my small 2-bedroom apartment in Dayton, I couldn't sleep. The walls felt closer than usual. The silence heavier. My late husband's recliner still faced the TV, untouched since the funeral, like a reminder of a life that had already ended once. I stared at the ceiling and replayed the laughter again and again. It wasn't about the phone. It was about what it represented. I had raised 2 kids alone after my husband died of a heart attack at 55. I worked double shifts, missed birthdays, packed lunches at dawn. I had survived layoffs, hospital bills, and grief that nearly swallowed me whole. And now I was the woman who couldn't use a phone. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I made a list. Not a grocery list. Not a to-do list. A life list. At the top, I wrote, "Prove, at least to myself, that I'm not done." I didn't know what that meant yet. I only knew one thing. I couldn't stay where I was. Within a week, I sold half my furniture. Donated clothes I hadn't worn in years. I took my savings, modest, careful, earned the hard way, and opened a new bank account at a different branch, one no one else knew about. Lisa noticed something was different when I declined Sunday dinner. "Everything okay, Mom?" she asked over the phone. "Yes," I said truthfully. "I'm just busy." Busy doing what? I couldn't yet explain. But late at night, sitting at my kitchen table with the hum of the refrigerator and the glow of a borrowed laptop, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Fear. And right beneath it, excitement. Because for the first time since my husband died, my life was mine again, and I was about to build something no one expected, least of all my grandchildren. I wish I could say I woke up the next morning confident and fearless. I didn't. I woke up terrified. The kind of fear that sits heavy in your chest before you even open your eyes, the kind that asks uncomfortable questions. What if I fail? What if I embarrass myself again? What if they were right about me? But fear has a strange way of sharpening your focus. And mine told me one thing very clearly. If I stayed still, I would disappear. So I started small. Painfully small. I went to the public library in Dayton, the same red brick building I used to take my kids to after school. I asked the librarian, my voice shaking, if they offered computer classes. She smiled like I'd asked something completely normal. We have a beginner course, she said. All ages. All ages. That mattered more than she knew. The first day of class, I nearly turned around and left. The room was full of people younger than me. Not teenagers, but younger enough to make me feel ancient. My hands shook as I sat down in front of a computer that hummed softly, like it was judging me. The instructor explained things slowly, patiently, but my mind kept drifting back to my grandson's laughter. Every mistake felt like proof I didn't belong there. I went home exhausted, head pounding, pride bruised. And yet, I went back the next day, and the next. I learned how to send emails, how to open a document, how to search for information without feeling stupid. Every small victory lit a spark inside me. Not confidence, yet, but defiance. Around that time, I took a part-time job at a local thrift store. Nothing fancy. Sorting donations. Working the register. It wasn't about the money. It was about showing up somewhere that didn't see me as the old one. One afternoon, a customer noticed the hand-knit scarf I was wearing. "You make that?" she asked. "Yes," I said automatically. Then hesitated. "I mean, yes, I do." Her eyes lit up. "You should sell these. People would buy them." I laughed it off at first. Who would buy something made by a 64-year-old woman who barely knew how to use a phone? But that night, sitting at my kitchen table, that thought wouldn't leave me alone. I had been knitting since I was a teenager. Scarves, sweaters, blankets, baby booties. I had made half of my grandchildren's winter clothes by hand. For free. Always for free. I mentioned it casually during computer class the next week. "You can sell online," one of the women said. "My aunt does." Online. That word still scared me. But fear was starting to lose its power. I spent weeks learning, watching tutorials, writing things down on yellow notepads like a schoolgirl. I opened an online shop with trembling hands, listing 3 scarves I'd made from leftover yarn. The first week, nothing. The second week, nothing. I told myself this was just practice, that I was learning. Then one morning, while making coffee, my email chimed. "You've made a sale." I stared at the screen like it was a miracle. Someone in Portland, Oregon had bought my scarf. A stranger. Someone who didn't know my age. Didn't know my family. Didn't see me as outdated or slow or invisible. They just liked what I made. I cried right there in my kitchen, hands over my mouth, coffee forgotten. That sale wasn't about money. It was about worth. But success has a way of waking up old doubts and old wounds. When Lisa found out what I was doing, her reaction wasn't what I hoped. "That's cute, Mom," she said. "Just don't get your hopes too high." The same word people use for hobbies. For distractions. For things they don't take seriously. I hung up the phone and sat quietly for a long time. Then I picked up my knitting needles and worked late into the night. Because I wasn't doing this to impress anyone anymore. I was doing it to survive. And I was only just beginning to realize how much I had been holding myself back, long before anyone laughed at me. Success doesn't announce itself loudly at first. It sneaks in quietly, testing whether you'll notice. For me, it came disguised as routine. Wake up early. Knit while the sun rose. Answer emails. Package orders with care, slipping handwritten thank you notes inside each box like little pieces of myself. Walk to the post office. Smile at the clerk who started recognizing me. Weeks turned into months. 3 scarves became 10. 10 became 30. Customers began leaving messages, kind ones, personal ones. "This feels like something my mother used to make. You can tell this was made with love. Thank you for reminding me of home." Those words filled a place inside me I hadn't realized was empty. I started experimenting, new colors, patterns I'd never tried before. I watched videos late at night, pausing and rewinding, learning techniques women half my age had mastered years ago. My hands ached sometimes. My eyes got tired, but my spirit felt awake. One afternoon, I was invited to join a local craft fair in Yellow Springs, Ohio. I almost said no. Standing behind a table, talking to strangers, explaining myself, it all felt too exposed. But then I remembered how invisible I had felt on my daughter's couch. So I said yes. The day of the fair, I set up my table with nervous care. Scarves folded neatly. A simple sign with my shop name handwritten in blue ink. I wore my best coat, and the scarf I was most proud of. People stopped. They touched the fabric, asked questions, smiled. And when they asked who made them, I said, I did. Not apologetically, not jokingly, just honestly. By the end of the day, I was nearly sold out. I drove home with sore feet, a full heart, and something unfamiliar sitting beside me in the passenger seat. Confidence. But confidence has a way of unsettling people who are used to seeing you small. Lisa noticed the change during one of our calls. You sound busy, she said. Like, really busy. I am, I replied. With the scarves? She asked, a hint of disbelief in her voice. With my business, I corrected gently. There was a pause on the line. That's great, Mom, she said eventually. But her tone didn't quite match the words. When Thanksgiving rolled around, I was invited over again. This time, I brought store-bought pie I hadn't had time to bake. The kids were taller, louder, glued to their phones. Tyler barely looked up when I walked in. But later, as I helped Lisa in the kitchen, she mentioned something that made my heart skip. Emma showed her friends your shop, she said. They think it's kind of cool. Kind of cool. Not cute. Not old-fashioned. Cool. At dinner, Tyler asked me a question he never had before. So, how many people buy your stuff? I shrugged. Enough. He nodded slowly, like he was recalibrating something in his mind. That should have felt like victory. Instead, it stirred something complicated inside me. Because the truth was, I hadn't built this life to earn their approval. But part of me still wanted it. Then came the email that changed everything. A boutique owner from Asheville, North Carolina had found my shop. She wanted to carry my scarves in her store. Not one or two, dozens. I read the message 3 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. Dozens meant deadlines. Consistency. Pressure. It meant I couldn't stay small anymore, even if staying small felt safer. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the same place where this journey had begun. The city outside my window hummed quietly. Cars passed. Lives moved forward. I thought about the woman I had been a year earlier, the one who shrank herself to avoid embarrassment. And I realized something startling. If I said no now, it wouldn't be because I couldn't do it. It would be because I was afraid of being seen. So I replied, yes, I wrote. I can do that. I had no idea how I'd manage the workload. No idea how far this road would take me. But for the first time in my life, uncertainty didn't feel like a threat. It felt like an invitation. Growth changes you. Not all at once. Not loudly. It changes the way you hold your shoulders. The way you answer questions. The way silence no longer scares you. By the time spring arrived, my life barely resembled the one I had been living a year earlier. I was working mornings and evenings, knitting with purpose now, not habit. I learned how to manage orders, track inventory, and say no when my body needed rest. I invested in better yarn, better tools. I even upgraded my phone on my own terms and taught myself how to use it without asking anyone for help. That mattered to me more than I expected. The boutique order led to another. Then another. My little apartment in Dayton started feeling too small, yarn stacked in corners, boxes lining the hallway. So I did something that would have terrified the old me. I moved. Not far, just to a sunlit one-bedroom outside Cincinnati, closer to shipping centers and craft markets. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. No memories of loss. No echoes of who I used to be. I didn't announce the move. I didn't ask for opinions. I simply went. Lisa noticed eventually. You moved? She asked during a call, surprise clear in her voice. Yes, I said. When were you going to tell me? When you asked, I replied gently. There was a pause, longer this time. I could feel the shift happening, even if she didn't have words for it yet. I was no longer orbiting around her life. I had my own. The hardest part wasn't the work. It wasn't the long hours, or the aching hands. It was the quiet realization that no one was checking on me anymore, not because they didn't care, but because they assumed I didn't need checking. And they were right. Months passed before we saw each other again. When we did, it was at Emma's school event. I walked in wearing a tailored coat I'd bought with my own earnings, hair neatly styled. Confidence settled into my bones. Tyler did a double take. "Grandma," he said, blinking. I smiled. He stared at my phone when it buzzed in my hand. New notifications, new orders. His eyes flicked up to my face, something unreadable crossing his expression. Later, as we sat in folding chairs, he leaned closer. "So, you still selling those scarves?" "Yes," I said. "More than ever." He nodded slowly, respectfully. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, it felt quiet. Because what I had learned by then was this: validation arrives late, often too late to matter. The real reward was waking up each morning knowing I had built something from the rubble of being dismissed. That I had chosen myself when no one else thought to. That night, back in my apartment, I received an invitation, one that made my hands tremble all over again. A regional lifestyle magazine wanted to feature my story. "Local woman reinvents life after 60. I laughed out loud, alone in my kitchen. If only they knew. I thought about the woman who couldn't take a photo at a family gathering. The woman who swallowed laughter like medicine. She felt like someone I had once known but no longer was. And somewhere deep down, I sensed something else coming. A moment when the past would finally meet the present. And when it did, I wouldn't shrink. The magazine article came out on a Tuesday. I didn't tell anyone, not Lisa, not the kids, not even the few friends I'd made at craft fairs. I wasn't hiding it. I just didn't feel the need to announce myself anymore. That was new for me. The article had a photograph of me standing by a window in my apartment, sunlight catching the yarn in my hands. The headline read, "She started over at 63 and never looked back." I stared at it for a long time before closing the laptop. Not because I was proud, because I was peaceful. 2 days later, Lisa called. Her voice was different. Softer. Careful. "Mom," she said, "why didn't you tell me?" I knew exactly what she meant. "I didn't know I had to," I replied. She exhaled slowly. "I read the article." I waited. "I had no idea," she said finally. "I mean, I knew you were busy, but I didn't realize you were doing all this." There it was. The unspoken truth. They hadn't seen me. Not because they didn't love me, but because they assumed my story was already finished. We met for lunch in Columbus, just the two of us. No kids. No distractions. She kept looking at me like she was trying to reconcile two versions of the same person. "I'm proud of you," she said at last. I nodded. "Thank you." And for the first time in my life, that was enough. A few weeks later, Tyler asked if he could come with me to a craft show. Said he needed ideas for a school project. He didn't say it outright, but I could hear the curiosity in his voice. We spent the day walking booth to booth. He watched how people talked to me, listened as I explained my process, saw the way strangers valued my work. At one point, he turned to me and said, "Grandma, you're kind of a big deal." I smiled. "I'm just me." He shook his head. "No. You're more than that." That night, back home, I sat alone with a cup of tea and let myself remember that afternoon. The laughter, the phone, the way I'd felt so small. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt grateful. Because sometimes being underestimated is the greatest gift life can give you. It gives you room to grow quietly, to fail privately, to succeed without permission. I still knit every day. I still learn new things. I still make mistakes. But I no longer apologize for them. And when my phone rings now, when I answer it confidently, without hesitation, I don't think about who laughed. I think about who I became after. This is my life. And it turned out bigger than anyone expected.